Hey everybody, I'm Marlos E'van. I'm an artist based in Nashville, Tennessee. And for the past week, I've been in New York for my New York debut called ghostDope at Elijah Wheat Showroom. I just want to take y'all through some of the work before I hop on this plane in about an hour. So let's start here. This is from The Living to the Dead. It's a piece based off of the reality and the feelings that come when a family member dies of an overdose. And so I have a personal friend, she's a mother, and ended up losing her only child to an overdose about a year ago. And this piece is a homage to her in that situation. It's pretty much inspired by Kathy Coates in how she lost a husband and a son till the war. I think it was World War I and II. So this is From the Living to the Dead. One of the main things about ghostDope, people ask me all the time, what does it mean? For me, ghostDope means everything. It's about the highs, the lows, the injustices, all of these aspects involving life within drugs. That really hit close to home with me, having a lot of friends and family that were involved with drugs or the injustices that surround drugs. Like for instance, in Louisiana, you can get caught with a speckle of weed 3 times and go to prison for 3 strikes. One thing about the drug game in that whole ghostDope world that I know about is the idea of the smoker car. So I knew some people that were heavily involved in crack, addicted to crack. And one of the things that they would do to get like free crack was loan their cars out to drug dealers. This is an example of one of those cars that I actually rode in personally that a family member owned. Smoker car. So another aspect of life in this ghostDope world is reflected in this piece. It's called Somewhere. There's a little old lady putting up her house to get her son or grandson out of jail. This one hit close to home for me, as my grandma personally, before my generation, put up her house and went to extreme financial lengths to get family members out of jail. So when it came to my generation, she looked me right in the eyes and said, "Son, if you go to jail, don't call me." And I understood because all of these risks that she was taking, she never got paid back by people. And it just leaves a person that's already struggling in a deeper hole. But I think this piece is a homage to her and all the women like her who have risked it all to take care of their family. Do I think that's the act of that is something worth celebrating? No, because I don't want these people to be in those situations, like these women, these grandmas, these mothers, but it's the reality of how it's been for such a long time. You know, one of the things that always bothered me was the idea of young black and brown men that I personally know, all of us sharing the statistic of going to jail. The first time I ever went to jail, I hated the fact that I was a statistic at that time. So when I know people personally that go to jail for the first time, I despise the fact that we share this union, this sort of fraternity of being black and brown and being in prison. This particular piece speaks on that reality, but it also speaks on the reality of what goes on within jail. Like for instance, this piece is called Jumpsuits, aka Redemption of Humanity. What that title means for me is the things that we don't know and the emotions that we don't realize happen within jail. Like for instance, you do have fear. In some situations, you have joy and excitement, contemplation, confusion, sickness and death. But within those walls and those conditions of being institutionalized, being isolated, you do have these moments where bonds are being strengthened. Kind of like unwritten and unsaid rules. So I wanted to reflect it in this piece. I think this says it all, but just so you know, this is a mound of prescription pills. And we all know prescription pills is plaguing our country right now. It's taking our youth, it's taking our citizens, it's fracturing families. I wanted to reflect that by painstakingly cutting out and hand sewing all of these life-size pills. As we move on to this piece, it's called Blank Generation. For the past few years, I was observing heroin trade, like a front row seat in Tennessee. And this is reflection of one of the things that I witnessed while being in that underworld. It was blank. It was all blank. And in this piece of thing, the windows blank, the mirrors blank, newspapers blank. Everything's pretty much blank. In the room itself, I'm very much inspired by Van Gogh's The Room with this tilted perspective, similar to German Expressionism. Now this one is very complicated. It's called Drunken Slave Master. And what it does, it deals with the idea of power is dope, oppression is dope, which is addictive. So here we got this drunk slave master who busts in slave quarters. But the thing is, we don't know which one of these occupants he's here to take out and have his way with in the middle of the night. If you read further about what was going on during slavery, we definitely know that women were largely being sexually abused, raped, everything surrounding it. But there's also untold stories of African American men being sexually abused too by slave masters and overseers. This piece is in conversation with that. And it's also in conversation with G's being quilters. So one of the things with this body of work that I wanted to do was pay homage to certain people. And I feel like this one came out through pure energy. It's called Even in Death He Plays / Elijah. Very much inspired by Elijah Wheat himself. And it talks on the fact about even in death, we don't always die. Sometimes we continue to inspire, we continue to live. And that's what this is. I call this one obstacles. And I don't think I have to go into too much detail about it. But basically, it reflects the obstacles of young women and women of color, daily obstacles, what they're facing. And these are some of the obstacles and hurdles. Now this one, so I'm from Mississippi. I don't know if I told y'all that. but this is inspired true events. James Meredith happened to be the first person of color to attend University of Mississippi / Ole Miss. Well, upon submitting his application to get into Ole Miss, he was denied several times, James Meredith. There's actually documentation in Time magazine from that era in the 60s where James Meredith was doing a march for equality. He was gonna march from Memphis to Jackson, Mississippi. During that march, a man was hiding in the bushes and shot him with a rifle in the back. James Meredith, they rushed him to the hospital. Upon him being in the hospital recovering, over 15,000 marchers took up his march and finished it out. In the last leg towards Jackson, he was able to come back and finish the march himself. Till this date, it's one of the largest civil rights marches in the world. This one is Box of Churches. And so Box of Churches for me represents the idea of easy access to guns and ammo, which is another plague, I believe, in our country when it's in the wrong hands. For me, you might look and say, well, what does Box of Churches have to do with a box of ammo? Well, you gotta think about it. Each bullet sends people to church for funerals. So that was what I was trying to reflect in this piece. A box of ammo is literally a box of churches. Wow. Nativity scene of hate. Hate as dope. Addiction to being hateful. In this case, hate supports power structures. It's passed along generation to generation, even until the new generation. At what point does the cycle stop? So this is crack Polaroid. It's based off of actual memory that I have when I was about 11 or 12 in a relative's house. And this particular relative never wanted me to see him smoking crack. This particular day, I was leaving from the back of their house and I startled him and his two friends while they were loading up a crack pipe. That relative immediately tried to hide the pipe, but I was too late, I saw it. I never forgot that. That's why I titled it Crack Polaroid. Because since that moment lived in my mind like a Polaroid picture. So this is Butcher Chart. One day I was just sitting in the studio thinking about a lot of the things that's wrong in our country. Where we tend to blame each other. But I feel like this chart really shows what we should be looking at under the microscope to make our country better. Am I wrong? So I think in my work, one of the things I deal with is the idea of representation and stereotypes. Angela Davis, in her book, Women, Race, and Class, she mentioned the idea of the black male myth, where this myth was being perpetuated, where the black man is gonna come to your town, rape the women, kill the children, take your jobs. That's a false line. Many young black men have died based on that. Like for instance, the Tulsa massacre, that was sparked by them saying a young black male assaulted somebody. Just like with Emmett Till, they said he whistled at a woman, which that same lady on her deathbed a few years ago said it never happened. This is a reflection of that. The idea of the black beast that's coming to destroy your city and destroy your town and hurt everybody involved. It's a lie, and I wanted to reflect that in this piece. So this is a wanted poster, and that's the name of the piece, Wanted. So one of the things I wanted to share with y'all is the way I hung the work, and the framing or lack of thereof. So, for instance, this green wood that you see on every piece in this show is actually reclaimed, and for me, it doesn't get much more punk rock than that. One of the biggest things that I wanted to do was wait till I got to New York to stretch the work. I wanted to walk the streets of New York, source the stretcher bars in the wood, which we did. This is reclaimed wood, probably at least 100 years old, that we found in New York. The edges, it reminds me of Sam Gilliam actually. I think it's in conversation with him and how it takes the painting and turns it from just being a painting to more like this fabric that actually lives and breathes on your walls. When you walk by, it's breathing, it's actually interacting and living in space. The frayed edges, for me, it's an it can be called an imperfection, but for me, it's perfection. So one of the final pieces to this show, I feel, is this jacket. The same relative I was telling you all about in Crack Polaroid, this was the jacket that they wore on many crack runs. So for me, I thought it was very important to include this piece, not as to reflect an ongoing episode, but to reflect, well, I'll tell you this. You know how in sports, your favorite sports player, when they retire from the game and they hang their jersey up in the rafters? That's what this is. See, ghostDope, this show, it's not all about the bad. There's spots in here that represent the good and liberation. So this jacket, for me and for somebody else, represents liberation and freedom. So I appreciate y'all joining us, giving me an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the work, fill you in on what's going on. I'm about to catch this flight in just a few minutes, but I'll be back really soon. Only parting words I want to leave you, just remember, there's nothing more radical than having a Marlos E'van piece in your collection.